Welcome back to Mwera around Britain. This is episode 8. I go from St Ives around Land's End and then make several hops along the coast, ending up at Chichester Harbour in the eastern Solent. As I go along here, it's a part of the coast I know very well from the land, having visited many parts of it in the past, but never from the sea. There are lots of more stops, lots more exploring I could have done, but at this stage of the trip, time is a bit against me, so I have to press on. Going round Land's End, you actually almost do a full 360-degree circle, so planning with wind and tides is a bit tricky, and the south-going tide window at Land's End itself is only for about 3 hours, so that puts a bit of pressure on. I did get to Land's End just as that stream was getting into full strength and decided fairly much at the last minute to take the inside route. I could see ahead of me where the overfalls were and thought that I'd go inside of them, but the tide just carried me straight into them, and I had a very hair-raising few minutes just holding on the cockpit whilst I was swept through, and then came out into some very calm, gentle sailing afterwards. This is the open air theatre that you go past, and then I came around the corner past Mousel and went into Newlyn Harbor, which I chose instead of Penzance because it's accessible at all tide and actually has very good facilities for visiting yachtsmen, although the harbour is mainly full of fishing boats and very active. Don't know why it is that boats are so attractive in the photo, so photogenic, but probably the hard, bright colours and all the lines and shapes and curves, but they're certainly fun to photograph. I spent a couple of nights in Newlyn waiting for suitable weather to push on, and then I went across the bay and round the Lizard into Falmouth. This time I took quite a wide circuit around the Lizard, a couple of miles or 3 miles off, and came into Falmouth for a night. As I came into the entrance to Falmouth River, I encountered a lot of boats going out for Thursday evening racing, and those racing yachtsmen are not so keen on giving you any right of way, so I had to weave my way through them to pick up a visitor's mooring. Managed to capture a shot of these Robert Knox Johnson footsteps on the old quay at Falmouth. Next day I left there and carried on across to Plymouth. Captured a little bit of my setting off on video. Afternoon, Mwera team. Just got out of Falmouth Harbour and myself set up. Sailed to Plymouth. You know, as goose winged on the starboard side there, and steering by wind vane. Whoops. And this is me now for the next 7 hours, just rolling along till I get to the entrance to Plymouth Harbour. And I'm planning to anchor in Studland Bay for the night because I'll get there quite late, and then probably go into a marina tomorrow evening. Cool. See you later. When I got to Plymouth, I spent a night on anchor in Studland Bay, just a nice simple place to arrive, and from there the next day I moved into Queen Anne's Battery Marina, and managed to meet up with the administrator for the Corribee Owners Group on Facebook and talk about Corribees for an hour or two over a beer, which was fun. And what I realised was that the next day there was going to be a force 8 gale coming through, and rather than spending another night in Marina stormbound as it were, I decided to push on at about midnight and head down for the Dart, which was going to be my next stop. And I worked out that if I could get into the river by about 8 o'clock in the morning, then I would be ahead of the weather that was coming in. So that went nicely. Had a nice night crossing across the bay and round Start Point, and then down, racing along on a reach to enter the Dart. But just before I got to Ditcham, which is where I was going to take a visitor's mooring, the wind came in, and I had a very exciting time getting the sails down in pouring rain. And one amazing thing that happened was that one of the plastic shackles that holds the sail onto the sliders on the mast, the mainsail sliders, one of those shackles popped off, and I thought I'd lost it. And the next day I found it. Somehow when it came off, it had clipped itself around one of the shrouds just next to the mast, which is extraordinary. Quite how that happened I don't know, but anyway, there it was. I had a nice time at Ditcham. This is a place where we used to have some family holidays with a mirror dinghy and a laser and various other things going on. So it was a nice nostalgic trip, including supper in the pub there. Just a bit of footage of the Dart. Just heading down from Ditcham to Dartmouth in the dinghy. One of the sliders for the mainsail got snapped off yesterday in the strong wind, so I'm just trying to get a replacement in Dartmouth and a bit of food. I was going to get the ferry, but for various reasons relating to strong winds, the ferry's been cancelled. So heading down the dinghy, a couple of miles, and fortunately the wind's a bit more from the west, so the river isn't so windy as it was yesterday. Cheers, greetings from the Dart. On my way out of the Dart, I went past this super yacht Ngoni at 58 metres long, with a beam of about 10 metres, as wider than Mwera is long. And she did actually come past me on my way to Weymouth. She was motoring whilst I was sailing. So from here, yes, I was heading to Weymouth. That meant going round Portland Bill, another very notorious tidal gate, which I chose to take a wide berth around again, about 3 miles off, to avoid any involvement in the overfalls. And coming into Weymouth in the evening, I was due to pick up my son Tom, who was coming on board for a few nights. So we left Weymouth about 6 o'clock the next morning, heading for Studland Bay via Swanage, and had a lovely summer sail along the coast there, coming past the cliffs just before Swanage, where we've done quite a bit of climbing together, and then had a brief stop at Swanage for ice cream and supplies, and then went round the corner past Ives Rocks into Studland Bay. Last time I'd been there was probably when I was about 5 years old on a family holiday. It was quite fun to go back again, and nice anchorage with clever eco mooring buoys to protect the seagrass on the seabed, and quite busy as always, I guess. On our way to Studland Bay, I noticed there was a problem with the Genoa furler, which was just spinning freely around the forestay. When I looked, I saw that the chain plates had snapped off the bottom of the furling drum, so it really had, the forestay was still intact, but the furling drum was no longer connected to the boat. And I managed to get the chain plates off, putting the spinnaker halyard as a temporary forestay, and drilled the plates, and then went to one of the hotels on land and asked to borrow their workshop, which they allowed me to do, so I could bend the tips of the plates over again and reattach them onto the furling drum. So that was quite handy. Our next stop was Newtown River on the Isle of Wight, and here we are entering the Needles Channel, tide under us, speeding along, And here we are going past the cardinal mark, marking the channel. And our friend who follows the webcams managed to capture us here, zipping up the channel. You can just see Mwera on the right hand side of this short bit of film, and also on the photo here. The river was pretty full, all the visitors' moorings were taken, and we managed to find an anchorage right at near the entrance and squeeze ourselves in there for a night. Just heading out of this narrow inlet to the River Newton. Not wide at all, but plenty of depth. Say again? Hang on a minute, I'm just doing a little. So heading out off to Chichester. From the river we headed straight across to the mainland just to visit Hill Head. Well, this is actually Hill Head Sailing Club, where I sailed in my 10s and my teens, and this is a beach probably where I learnt to sail on an old clinker-built dinghy called a Jacqueline. We then crossed over to the entrance to Chichester Harbour and were greeted by all these boats rushing out ahead of us. And we went into Northerny Marina, where I'd arranged to meet up with a friend who'd come down for the day with his son, and we had a lovely sail in the harbour before lunch with a nice force 4 breeze, and you can see Chris was loving it. This was a heron I captured there on the mud as I was leaving the next day, and that brings us to the end of this episode. As you can see, I'm pushing on with fairly big steps now, aiming to finish by the end of July, and this is the 20th now. So in the next episode we'll go from Chichester and end up in Ramsgate, rounding North Foreland before we head across the Thames estuary back into familiar cruising ground for me. So see you next time.